Hey, everybody. I'm Rebecca Giannini. Welcome. If you are here in this group, it's because you are a parent or a person who wants to work on your relationships. I'm so glad that you're here. I go live every single week at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I talk about everything related to parenting and relationships. So tonight is a topic request from somebody in the group. Christina, can you read that question that was sent in?
Yes, of course. So the parent messaged me.
Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Sorry. The parent messaged me, so it would be kind of private. But they said that there's some back talk happening in the house, which feels endless. There's two main issues with it. First, she gets super overwhelmed when the child's mouth doesn't stop talking. Second, I get super annoyed when the back talk comes in the form of a know-it-all attitude. For example, the mom pointed out a forklift they were passing as they were driving on the freeway, and the child said, no, in fact, it's not a forklift, but it was. So the parent says, why do they do this?
Okay. First of all, congratulations to you if you are the parent who sent this in. What it means is that you are engaged enough with your kids and you are trying to find solutions to get help for your family dynamic. So I love that for you and nicely done. So kudos to you, first of all. The second thing I would say is a lot of times, well, there are several different pieces to this. So I'm going to, talk about those pieces separately. But let's talk about the back talk being endless. And it sounds like for every little thing, there's some sort of smart answer. For every little thing, there's some sort of disagreement. When we have that, that's usually an indication of the child needing to preserve their sense of dignity or to preserve their sense of autonomy, to shift the power dynamic in some way. And so when they have an answer for everything, even when they're wrong, when it's so clear that they're wrong about it, and there's only like one objective truth, like it was a forklift or it was, the sky is blue or whatever it is, and they still have to oppose you. That is a sign that there is a power dynamic in the relationship that needs to be worked on. So when we feel like we don't have power in a relationship, we have to push back in order to maintain our sense of dignity. And even when we are pushing back, we can feel that we're being ridiculous. And it can feel like, I don't even know why I'm saying this. I don't even know why I'm doing this. From the perspective of the child, I know I'm wrong about this, but I have to push back anyway. And it's almost like this compulsion to push back on what is being said. And so the child themselves might not even understand that. So I would encourage you to look at the relationship and look at, maybe over the course of the next week or the next 2 weeks, look at how often power is at play. How often are you making decisions for them? How often does it seem like somebody's vying for power in an interaction? Pay close attention to that. Now, obviously, you've noticed where they're vying for power, but you might not realize that back talk as them vying for power. So start to pay attention to that through that lens of, oh, they're trying to regain some dignity. They're trying to regain some power in this relationship. Start noticing how often that happens. And you've mentioned it, that it feels like it's endless. But start excuse me, start noticing how often you are giving them something that they have to push up against in order to maintain some of that dignity. How oftentimes are you requiring them to go along with what you're saying without providing them an opportunity to have any influence over this situation? Just try and kind of keep a tally chart of how often they might feel powerless during a given week. And if there are other areas in their life that they feel powerless, like at school, I mean, it's right now it's summertime, but that is a major area where kids often feel quite powerless. So that's something that I would pay close attention to. The know-it-all attitude that you mentioned also is pretty common in the same situations, is feeling like that is closely related to the need to maintain that dignity too, is I can't be wrong, I have to be right, I have to be the one in power here. That know-it-all attitude, even when they don't know everything, oftentimes is just directly correlated to them not being able to be perceived as weak or be perceived as wrong. So I would look at the same thing there. What you might say to them is offer some curiosity and offer some compassion, and that might feel so counterintuitive in the moment, because you're you say something and they escalate, and then you might escalate and they escalate, and it might feel like this back and forth of who's going to get bigger and who's going to puff up their chest more, basically. And so when they keep getting bigger and then you come in with compassion, it's going to de-escalate the situation. And it might feel really strange at first to offer compassion in a situation like that, but it's really what they need, because what they're saying is, I don't feel safe. I have to protect myself here. So when you can confront that with sadness instead of letting yourself be triggered by the disrespect or triggered by their know-it-all attitude, it can really make a big difference over time. I might say something like, so let's say, for example, we're talking about the forklift situation. If they say something like, if you say, oh, look at that forklift, and they say, that's not a forklift, you might be really tempted to be like, yes, it is. That's exactly what a forklift is. But then we're starting to engage in a argument, right? So you know that it's a forklift. You don't need to engage in proving it to them that it's a forklift. It is what it is, right? So when you can recognize that they need to fight over something as arbitrary as what the name of an item of machinery is, we want to pause and recognize, oh, this is a moment of sadness. This isn't a moment where I need my anger engaged. This is a moment of sadness. They're struggling. So I might say something like, boy, the last couple of things I've said, it seems like you really, really want to argue with me right now. How come you feel like you want to argue with me right now? Is it that you want to argue? Are you upset about something? And we move in with compassion and concern. How come it feels like everything that I bring up right now, you want to, prove wrong? Why is that so important for you to prove me wrong right now? And we begin trying to explore with them, why is it important to you that I'm wrong about this? How come? And at this point, it's totally irrelevant that we're talking about the forklift. We're talking about something completely different. We're talking about what's actually going on, which is they're so mad at me. They're so struggling in this relationship that they have to push up against everything I say. And that is sad. So when we can engage in our sadness, it deflates that sense of anger that is just lying right underneath the surface. That is where I would start with, is just noticing how many times that person feels or is experiencing a moment in which they feel like they don't have autonomy, or they're trying to find some power in the relationship, and then engage in sadness when they're feeling powerless, because that's what's going on. I want to check the comments real quick. All relationships can use this at all ages. You're so right, Michelle. Yes. In so many of our relationships, there is a struggle for who's going to be in power. And in a healthy relationship, nobody's in power. Healthy relationships are not about power. They're about connection. And so if you're vying for power in a relationship, it means that something's off. And we want to get to a place where we're aiming toward connection. And if we are trying to get back power in the relationship, it means that there's something fundamentally off, that relationship feels fundamentally unsafe in some way, and that we need to shift the relationship so that we can get back to a place of safety. Everybody deserves their needs to be met. Everybody deserves to be listened to when they're struggling. Everybody deserves to be spoken to with respect, even when the speaker's upset. Everybody deserves their body safety, and everybody deserves their boundaries. So this situation where we're back talking shows that there's a sense of resentment, and there's a lack of safety, and we can also sort of have the situation where we're like primed for a fight, which, you know, comes from oftentimes that feeling of powerlessness, but where we're sort of like ready for a fight. And when my kids were young, I used to describe this as being really no-y. Like our bodies are just ready to say no. Like there were times where, you know, we would, like I could even suggest something like, hey, let's go to ice cream. And I was like, no, 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 no. And so we started, you know, describing it as being really no-y. Like our bodies are just ready to say no. Our bodies are ready for a fight, ready to be engaged in grumpiness, or ready to disengage, ready to be angry with each other. And this can happen among siblings too. So they could be primed for a fight at every engagement. So if you notice this, this pattern where it's just like they're ready to be angry, ready to be grumpy, bring that up, talk about it, but talk about that with kindness, talk about it with sadness. Boy, it feels like no matter what I suggest today, your answer is no. Oh, it feels like no matter how your sister asks you to play, like your ready answer is no. How come? Why does that feel so important that you want to say no to her all the time? How come your body is ready to fight with her? And we begin to ask that question and make it safe to talk about those things that are difficult. If we can make it safe to talk about the difficult things, then they're not so difficult. They get easier over time. So I think that that's where I'm going to leave it. Short and sweet tonight. We don't need to be right. No, Michelle, we don't need to be right. And it's actually quite important that we can recognize when we're wrong. It's such a gift when you can model for people that it's okay to be wrong, and even laugh at ourselves when we're wrong. No, we don't need to be right. And being wrong with grace is such a beautiful thing. And I recommend it highly, because if we're not wrong, we're not learning, we're not growing. So yeah, learn to make friends with being wrong, learn to make friends with owning up to your mistakes, with making mistakes, with doing repair work. I have a section in here in the group about repair work, and repair work is so important. It's about how we handle ourselves when we do make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I had to do repair work this week. I have to do repair work all the time, and that's what it's for. We don't want to disparage or, you know, put ourselves down when we do make mistakes. We want to just honor the fact that we're humans and know that mistakes are how we learn. Mistakes don't make us bad. Mistakes are how we learn, and repeated mistakes often just show that we have internal framework stuff that's getting in our way, and patterns of behavior that we don't yet know how to shift. So be gentle with yourself. And if you need any of the resources on reparenting or anything like that, let us know and we'll get you the resources that we need. Also, feel free to put in a topic request. I'm happy to do more topic requests. I have a million topics I could talk about, but I do love taking topic requests because it gives you a chance to ask questions that are important to you. So you can either put that topic request, you can put that in through Christina. I prefer you do that than in the comments. That would be easier if you can private message Christina. But if you feel comfortable putting in the comments, do that. You're so welcome, Richard. And I will see you guys soon. All right. Take care of yourselves and see you in the comments. Bye-bye.